Okay, I'm pressing and I can edit the chat. Looks like the test one is live.
Yes, and it's called test, but we can rename, and that is currently live.
I'm Rin.
And then we can also record. You can also record as the host, Nadia. You have to press record when you want to.
Great, let's do that. I'll do that on the hour, if that's fine, David.
Yeah, that's fine. Okay, everyone. Welcome to the group conversation for Secure. My name is David DeSanto. I'm Director of Product for Secure and Defend. To start this off, we wanted to go through a couple of slides. We won't go through the entire deck. The entire deck is available in the document. But first, we just want to do a brief introduction to how the team is looking at Secure and how it relates to Defend. Before I get started, can everybody see the slides? Somebody want to give me a thumbs up? Perfect. Okay, so just for the brief introduction, and we talked about this again on the Defend call as well as on the the security team talked about on their call. So when we're talking about security, we kind of look at it from two different sides. So there's red team assessments, and that's what Secure is, and we'll talk about that on this call. But essentially, we're assessing whether it's a vulnerability scan, static code analysis, dynamic analysis. We're verifying the issues, whether they're weaknesses or vulnerabilities within an application or service. Our goal is to be able to find those ahead of time before things go out to production. Whereas on the blue team, and that's the Defend side, that's getting into assessing whether the security policies and procedures are actually mitigating attacks or malware, or whatever the case might be. And the goal with it is to provide that defensive protection side, and that's where last time in the Defend when we talked about the WAF. When you combine red and blue together, it becomes known as a purple team assessment. So all of you who remember that from elementary or primary school, remember that red plus blue equals purple. So I can't say the security industry is very original with that. But the goal of that is to be able to conduct a live attack against an environment and then confirm how well it holds up. So you're going to have, in the case of red, you're going to have malicious actors, most likely a penetration team, penetration testing team, attack an environment, and then the blue side is your security policies, procedures, and personnel to make sure that it is getting blocked. GitLab enables our users to do purple team testing today. And again, the purpose of this call is to talk about Secure. So we'll kick over to your questions here in a moment. But we also then provide the Defend side. Again, I mentioned the WAF. We also have threat prevention on the roadmap, as well as lots of other options. So with that, I'm going to kick it over to the questions, and we can begin to go through those. So there are no questions as of this point. If anybody has any, please add them. If not, I'll just assume that you all 100% know what's going on with Secure, and we can give people time back. I will take this moment while people are typing in questions to let you know that we do have some exciting changes on the staffing side. So there have been recent developers who have started within the Secure team. Since our last call, Matt Wilson, who's Senior Product Manager in Defend, is supporting the DAST, or the dynamic scanning part of Secure. And the final thing is we're extending an offer this week for a new PM. I know the PM team and the engineering team is very excited about that. The person, if they accept, which we're all hoping they do, will be coming in and helping with dynamic analysis, allowing Matt to go focus full-time on Defend. While on that note, I know a lot of you have asked questions in previous calls about where do we stand with supporting third-party integrations for people to use Secure. Matt, Nicole, and Sam have been actively working with engineering, so with Olivier and Seth and several others, to begin to make it easier for our partners to integrate in. I'm very excited about the direction they've been going. It's going to allow people to follow a common API and a common JSON structure and end up seeing the results showing up in the MR widget and the dashboard on the ultimate level. So very, very cool things going on. And I expect that we're going to continue to see really cool things from the team. Oh, here comes our first question. So Cindy, do you want to vocalize your question?
Sure. So my question is, how are we doing with dog fooding on the secure side in terms of GitLab actually using all of the types of scanning that we have available?
Sure. So I'll speak at a high level, and then I'll let Sam and Nicole jump in if they like to be more specific. So the team is actively working with the security team on how they can begin to use the tooling that we have within the secure portfolio. I know, again, like Sam has been actively talking to several people on the team about beginning to use the stack analysis as well as the dynamic analysis functionality. Sam and Nicole, is there anything else you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and add a little bit to that. If you remember in, I think it was 12.2, we introduced the ability to gate merge requests if they introduce new vulnerabilities because of the different scanners. We introduced that and are dog fooding that as part of our security products, which are the analyzers themselves. And so that's letting us, actually use that feature. And we've had some really good discussion on that, and what worked, what didn't work well, to hopefully make that better in the future. In terms of some of the DAST stuff we've been doing, we recently released DAST for the master branch. And so if you look at most of the merge requests you'll see on GitLab.com, you'll now see that as well. So that's more dog fooding efforts that we're doing, to be able to actually use the things we're building as part of developing our own products.
Great, thanks, Sam. Nicole, anything to add?
Right now, there have been a couple people who have reported in trying to use our scans, and I'm trying to prioritize fixes. But in a lot of cases, thankfully, they've been fixing some of the problems themselves. So I know there's at least 2 groups that are trying to use scanners, and I'm trying to prioritize the blockers and bugs for those to get it so they can actually use them regularly.
Thank you. I'm assuming, Cindy, that answered your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Next, Mark has a question. Mark, would you like to vocalize that?
Yeah, it's not a question, it's a bug report. On slide 10, you have your categories.yaml. License compliance is listed as it's planned to be viable by the end of Q3, but it's now 5 days past the end of that shipment date. So did we actually ship license compliance, whatever was going to be in license compliance to make it viable, or is it still minimal?
So I am trying to finish defining the way that we're defining maturity for SCA is I'm working with UX to define jobs to be done and the grade of each one of those jobs to be done. And if the highest priority job to be done for the primary persona is complete and at a high score level, it is then viable. But we're kind of working through having that properly formatted right now. I was hoping to get it done last week to confirm whether it was or not. So I can slip it if you'd like, but right now I can't 100% say yes or no because we are actually going and defining for all of SCA what our qualifications are for viable and complete.
All right. How long are you going to take to get there? I'm wondering how long the bug should live for, and whether you should just fix the bug in the hardest way, but would just change the plan to show Q4 instead of Q3.
Yeah, I can flip it, and then if it is viable, I guess I can always change it back. So.
Right, exactly.
I still consider that a question mark, just because you're saying it's a bug, but then you're asking if it actually is a bug.
Well, it's a bug because the 2 data points are inconsistent. Regardless,
yeah.
It's a bug. But yes, I know what you mean.
I'm hoping that going forward, since we're going to have a standard way to actually define viable and complete, this won't be an issue in the future. But right now, there's been a mass scramble for how exactly do we crisply define each maturity level.
Yes, and I wouldn't be surprised if that Q3 goal was set before you even joined. So you might not have been part of defining what the plan was.
I've actually changed those twice already since I started. So.
Yeah, I will say Mark does highlight one thing that's worth looking at if you've not looked at the maturity plan recently. There are a couple of things that have shifted out. A good example is fuzzing, because we're just getting the team up to speed on that. So we did push that out. There were also a couple of changes by Sam and Matt related to a couple of other items as well. That we're still pushing the team very hard to get to the goals we're setting. But we are trying to balance the lack of staff in some places with those goals, as well as I think Nicole did a good job explaining how we're trying to take a different approach to measuring maturity, because it's not just how we look at it, it's how the industry looks at it as well. Okay, so the our next question is from Simon. Simon, do you want to vocalize it?
Yeah, sure. So I've just had a call just now actually with a customer, and I had a couple of calls last week with the same basically conversation, which is they're looking at premium or silver, but a subset of their users want to go with gold or ultimate. I don't know what the proper way to handle that is in terms of a conversation. Are we going to say all your users have to have secure because that's our philosophy, that everyone has to do application security scanning across all the repos and all the projects, or is there a more sort of subtle and sophisticated way of saying it?
Sure. So there's kind of two parts to the question. So the first is, how do we talk to customers about the fact that certain features are in ultimate or gold and they may not need them, everybody might not need them. So I can tell you today, and there's an item in the handbook about this, that all users have to be on the same license level. We don't do intermixed license levels. That being said, to your second question, they're not the only customer who's asking this question. We have a lot of customers who are coming up and saying, hey, we're wanting to adopt GitLab security solutions, but we only need that for 100 of our 10,000 users who will be accessing the system. Is there a way to work around that? And to let you know, and I think I said this on the defend call because somebody similarly asked a question there, is that kind of quote Scott from the cab. He basically said, that's something we may have to start to look at. I know it's something we've not wanted to do. The solution that a couple of customers have done is deployed 2 different instances, one for their security team, one for their non-security team, and identified how to either sync the branches between the 2 instances or some other interesting combination. But I guess the point I want to leave you with is that I definitely have heard that in the time I've been here. I saw several people on this call nod their heads because I use the nice gallery view so I can see everybody at once. We're discussing how we want to address that, because I would say it is a fair comment to make that maybe your PV person does not need to be running security tests. So we'll continue to review that.
Cool, thanks, David.
Yep. Christopher, would you like to vocalize yours?
Thanks. Yeah, so a lot of times we at GitLab focus on our problems. We don't talk a lot about our success, or we talk a lot about our successes, but we also talk a lot about our problems, so we can kind of focus on how to get better. And just kind of curious if I didn't see any slides around that, so I was just curious, like what are the biggest challenges for the team, and is there any way that we can help?
Sure. I mean, Olivier, do you want to vocalize the things you commented on before I kind of dive into it?
Yeah, sure. First one topic that I keep pushing again and again in our conversation. It's a complicated one. I think we're struggling in Secure to find a correct way to organize our group in a very cross-functional way, and having independent roadmaps and execution. It's partly tied to the way the feature and the code is organized in Secure, because we make a point to make sure that everything regarding vulnerability management workflow is generic, whatever the type of vulnerability, whereas the group are split by type of report. So they're kind of a position here. And also we're trying to address priorities, and sometimes a given group doesn't have enough capacity, so we have to rely on other groups to execute the roadmap for the stage priority. So it makes us switching context instead of staying focused in our own area. So definitely making sure we can keep on hiring to staff the teams, and making sure that we can have our scope staying focused in our own areas, I think. But we are aware of that. It's just that I think we're struggling to address it. A second one is we have functional needs for very language or technology specific skills. because we are not owning all the code that is leveraged for our features. We are integrating a lot of different open source tools, and this means we need specific skills in languages that we don't own ourselves, like for Java, Haskell, C#, etc., etc. And we need to understand those to correctly integrate the tools and understand the customer needs, which is, I think, was recently the most bad feedback we got, because we were not covering correctly of the Python environment, for example. So if we can find a way to expose those needs and maybe leverage skills within the wider company, that would be helpful, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to what Olivier just said. I think for me, the biggest challenges I've seen, and I know the PM team sees this as well, is one, identifying good candidates on the PM side who truly understand security. Because it's one thing to be able to read a blog about security, it's another thing to actually understand what that blog is actually saying at a lower level. And I think to kind of add to the development side, and this is a conversation I've been having probably more with Seth than anybody else in the secure team, is that as we try to differentiate ourselves between open source and commercial, or between core and ultimate, we're going to have to start identifying where we make key investments in understanding engine technology. And a good example would be the fuzzing conversation we've been having for the last several weeks. To properly be able to say fuzz the protocol that we're looking to fuzz, you need to not only understand the programming language that the engine's written in, but also the structure of that protocol. And I think we're going to run into where we're going to have to start identifying, hey, this is the type of resource we need for secure. This is what we're going to need for defend, because I think the same thing's going to happen there as well. Okay. Greg, would you like to vocalize your question?
Sure, thank you. So in support, it's come up a number of times where I'm troubleshooting the SAST functionality in a support ticket, and it turns out that ultimately the blocker is that the customer does not have access or public access to the internet. Any external resource that is to be fetched from the public internet, like Docker Hub or GitHub or GitLab, there must be an exception before it's allowed on their network or their systems. So throughout troubleshooting SAST in offline and on-prem instances, we found basically it would require that the customer download a number of Docker images and scripts in advance to have on their local machine. I've been following this issue here, and it has been updated somewhat, but it has been pushed back several times. And I'm just wondering, what is the plan for this, and if this is a good timeline to be setting for this?
That's a great question. And Nicole, I'll hand that over to you. I'm sorry, that's Sam. I'm sorry. Let me hand that over to Sam.
Yeah, I can take this one, David. Yeah, Greg, thanks for the question. So I'm looking at the issue that you linked in the document there. And so this is continuing to be a priority for us in the 12.5 release, because we have heard the pain point around offline air gap environments. In terms of delivery for 12.5, it's marked with the stretch label for this iteration. So that means that we're continuing to prioritize it, but we're not completely confident it's achievable in this milestone. We think there is a chance that it's potentially achievable, but it's not marked deliverable, which is really more of that commitment of delivery during the iteration.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Then hand it over to Mech.
Yeah, I just want to add something to make it clear, because it's part of the fact that we are integrating a lot of different open source tools. So for such a feature, we'll actually don't have just one single solution to address all the languages we are supporting. We will have to go through all the different analyzers, all the different open source tools we are integrating, and figure out what the way to achieve that feature in those each specific context. So that's why sometimes it can take a lot of time to roll up the feature on all the supported languages.
Is there, this is Darwin, is there an intelligent error messaging when this happens, or do we end up being in an individual root cause with each customer before we figure out this is the problem?
So generally, we can determine it pretty early on. If it is a truly closed or air gap network, it's going to fail almost immediately. It's not going to hesitate. And so the other thing is if they're using internal PKI and certificate authorities, we can see 509 errors on the Docker images and things like that. But it's between those two, it's pretty easy to identify early on. And I have communicated with the support team, like if this occurs, this is probably what's happening.
When I was on one team, we built a lot of developer tools that had assumed endpoints that were available. We did TCP connect to each of them, and then we could intelligently tell the user something's wrong with your network, and we would stop getting those calls altogether. So I'm not sure if that's possible in this case, but I just wanted to pass that on.
Thank you, Darwin. Again, let's hand over to Mech to go over his question. So you want to vocalize that?
Sure, thanks. First of all, thanks for listing the quality counterparts on the slides. I appreciate that. In the same vein that Christopher asked, how can we help make testing and validating move faster? I see we have very little number of P1 missed SLO, so kudos to that. How can we eventually get that to 0?
That's a great question. Let's hand that over to engineering to first comment. So I don't know, Todd or Seth or Olivia, you want to make a comment to that?
Yeah, I'll just say that right now, basically, I think that we want to work together with QA to round our tests out, and I think we have a lot of support going with that. There are a few little things that I'd like to see around permissions and what have you, but for the most part, from my level, it seems like it's going all right. So I'd turn over to the managers to see if they want to add anything.
I could keep saying the same thing again. Depending on where the bug is happening, it can be straightforward to fix it, or we can sometimes have to wait for an update on the upstream project or to contribute to that upstream project ourselves. But again, we are lacking a bit of capacity to achieve that kind of goals. So we try our best. I know, at least for my own group, that Nicole is making a point on prioritizing the bugs first. And I think we're doing a great job at addressing them. But still, we have so many different use cases and different environments to cover that the more people will use our feature, the more feedback we'll get and the more bugs we have about specific integrations. And most of the time it will be about environment compatibility and things like that. And it's trickier to address.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Nicole, for prioritizing as well. I'm good, thank you so much. Moving on to Nadia.
Yeah, I believe Nadia is not a question. I'm sorry, go ahead, Nadia.
It's not a question. I just wanted to share the link of the previous YouTube live stream so that it's linked somewhere. Cool.
That's great, thank you.
That's different, Nadia.
It is. I mentioned at the beginning, Philippe, that it wasn't on the channel. At least it wasn't visible because a couple people asked me for links to it. So she went and took care of that, I think, while we're on the call.
Okay.
Okay. On that note, I guess we'll give everybody back 2 minutes. Thank you very much for attending and talk to you all online.
Thanks, everyone.